Hi everyone, welcome to our end of financial year webinar on payment summaries. My name's Claire and I'll be your host for today's session. Just a housekeeping note before we start. All attendees will be automatically muted to minimise background noise, so please pop your questions in the Q&A section and we'll answer these as we go through the presentation. Just a note, we won't be using the chat function, so please use the Q&A section only. Today's webinar is specifically for users who are exempt from reporting their payroll data to the ATO via SDP. These exemptions currently only apply to small employers with 19 or fewer employees. These businesses are exempt from reporting closely held payees. Also, WPN holders who are not lodging via a tax or BAS agent, and businesses that have been granted a deferral or special exemption from the ATO and have not lodged an STP event during the financial year. If you're not eligible for any of these exemptions, you should be reporting your payroll data via STP. You will not be able to generate payment summaries. If you have a mix of closely held and arm's length employees, then you should be reporting those arm's length employees by STP. We have a separate end of financial year webinar for STP that you can register for via our website. In the webinar today, we'll step you through the process of generating payment summaries for your eligible employees and show you how to register and begin reporting to the ATO via STP. We'll start by taking a look at some relevant end of financial year employee and business level settings that we strongly advise you to check before you start your year-end process. Then we'll cover how to generate payment summaries for your employees and enter any reportable fringe benefits amounts if required. Next, we'll go through sending employee notifications and methods for lodging the payment summaries with the ATO. We'll also look at ATO deadlines and what your employees can expect to see once your end of year has been finalised. And lastly, we'll show you how to register and begin reporting via single touch payroll. Remember, as of the 1st of July, if you have closely held payees on your payroll, they must be reported through STP. Before we get started, I just want to mention that all of the information I'm showing you today can also be found in our comprehensive end of financial year guide. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with the guide, a frequently asked questions document, and a recording of today's presentation, as well as some other helpful information. But you can always access these guides and any other end of financial year information using our support widget to search for any of our knowledge base articles. The support widget can be found on any page in the payroll software. Now let's get started. We'll begin by taking a look at some of the employee and business details you should check on before you start the end of year process. Starting with employee details, we can check these in bulk using the Employee Details report. Here, you can add to the display columns any data that you need to check. Some of the details we recommend checking include the employee's email address, postal address, tax file number, working holidaymaker status, and closely held employee status. Once you've entered these options into the search, you can then run the report and easily see on screen any employees that may be missing or have invalid information. Email addresses are important because you'll be sending notifications to the employee once their payment summaries have been published. For any business that will be printing out and posting payment summaries to employees, you'll need to ensure the postal addresses are current. If an employee has not provided their employer with their tax file number on commencement of employment, the system will generate a special purpose TFN, such as 111, However, it's highly recommended that you try to obtain the employee's actual TFN. If working holiday makers form part of your workforce, it's essential this setting is correct. Because they're taxed differently, incorrect classification may affect their tax return. If you're a business with 19 or fewer employees that is reporting to the ATO via STP, and you have closely held employees in the business for whom you need to provide payment summaries, you'll need to make sure these employees have been marked as closely held. If they've not been marked as closely held, and so have been included in STP events, you will need to complete a finalisation event for those employees. The Employee Details Report can also be downloaded to an Excel spreadsheet if you prefer to view it this way. Now, let's move on to checking business level settings. Looking first at ATO settings. Here, we need to make sure the fields are completed. The only fields which are not compulsory are fax number and branch number, unless you've been assigned a branch number by the ATO, in which case you will need to fill this in. Otherwise, if these ATO fields are incomplete, you won't be able to electronically lodge payment summaries or upload MDUP files. For businesses that may be exempt from fringe benefits tax, you'll find the relevant setting here on the ATO settings page. If the exemption applies to your organisation, make sure you've selected this option. FBT amounts can also be set at an employing entity level. We'll just go there now and have a look. You'll need to go into the entity, and here you'll see the same option is available. Again, if your employing entity is exempt from FBT, you'll need to select the correct option here. You should also ensure the business fields for these employing entities are correctly set up. Next, we'll take a look at how your pay categories are set up. So we'll just head there now. In particular, we'll take a look at any pay categories you might be using to pay allowances. If you're paying allowances to your employees that need to be reported as separate allowances on the payment summaries, you'll need to make sure that you've set these up correctly. To check the configuration for these allowances, we need to go into the relevant pay category and check the payment classification. We'll just have a look at this one here. You'll see the different options here for the available allowances. If you select default from here, any earnings paid using this pay category will be attributed to the employee's gross payments. If you select any other classification types, any amounts using these payment classifications will be listed separately on the payment summaries as allowances. I'll show you a bit later in the presentation what these allowances will look like on the payment summary. Correct classification of allowances will be extremely important to ensure you're compliant when you start reporting via STP. Now we'll take a look at your deduction categories. If you have employees that have deductions, there are specific settings that will need to be configured within the deduction category. Here you can see we now have system categories for a number of deduction types, including salary sacrifice super, workplace giving, union fees, and child support payments. If we look at the payment classification set up for union fees, for example, you can see we've assigned the correct classification. This setting will ensure the deductions are being identified separately on the payment summaries. If you're setting up your own deduction categories, you'll need to ensure you assign the correct classification. If an employee has salary sacrifice super being deducted, this will need to be reported separately on the payment summaries as RESC, reportable employer superannuation contributions. These amounts will only appear as RESC if the deduction has been set up as being paid to a super fund. If the amounts have been set up to be paid manually or to a bank account, it won't appear as RESC on the payment summaries and may have implications for the employee at tax time. Here's an example of a correctly set up salary sacrifice super payment in this pay run. Because it reduces an employee's taxable earnings and consequently the amount of PAYG withheld, it's essential that any salary sacrifice super is set up correctly. Employees may be left with a tax liability, which will require making changes to their payment summary and re-reporting the data lodged to the ATO. We strongly recommend you audit your RESC payments before starting the payment summary process, and the end of financial year guide has instructions to help you run this audit. If there is a discrepancy, this can be rectified on the payment summary screen, and we'll show you this later in the webinar. Setting up your salary sacrifice super deductions is not only important for making sure that they appear correctly on the payment summaries, but also when running your super payment reports. Correctly set up, these will ensure that the amounts all appear when you go to actually pay the employee's super. Now that we've checked the relevant business and employee settings, we can go ahead and generate the employee's payment summaries. To do this, we need to go to the Reports tab and then to Payment Summaries. You'll notice this warning. This reminds users that only businesses with an exemption can lodge payment summaries. Just a reminder, that's businesses with 19 or fewer employees, with closely held employees who have not been included in an STP event during the financial year, WPN holders who are not lodging via a tax or BAS agent, and businesses that have been granted a deferral or special exemption from the ATO and have not lodged a successful STP event during the financial year. However, if at any point in the financial year you have reported an employee by STP, you must finalise them by STP. They can't subsequently be marked as closely held. Remember, all non-closely held employees must be reported via STP. Now, to generate the payment summaries. You may wish to filter by employing entity, and this option will only appear if you do have multiple entities, of course, or you can filter by location. You'll then need to make sure you have the correct financial year selected. And then click Show Payment Summaries. The payment summaries will generate and appear on screen as a list of all relevant employees and their year-to-date earnings. For businesses that include a combination of closely held and arm's length employees, as this business does, only the closely held employees will be included on the payment summaries screen. Using the closely held employee filter on the employee details report I showed you earlier will help you to determine whether or not employees should be displayed here. At the top here, you can see the employees are appearing under the individual non-business tab, but there is also a tab for employment termination payments. If any ETPs were made to your employees in the financial year, this is where they'll be. If you have any unfinalised pay runs for the financial year, you'll see a warning like this one. To fix this issue, click through the Fix This link. The payment summaries will still generate where there are unfinalised pay runs, but they won't include data from those unfinalised pay runs. This is why it's so important to make sure those pay runs have all been finalised before continuing. Something to note about pay runs: be aware that the paid date of a pay run will determine the financial year that it will fall into for payment summaries. So, for example, even if your pay run dates fall in June, if the paid date is the 1st of July, then the data from that pay run will not appear in this year's payment summaries. Instead, it will be reported for the 21-22 financial year. Also, bear this in mind if there are any discrepancies when you're reconciling your end-of-year figures. You'll need to make sure that the paid date of the pay runs falls within the financial year that you're reconciling. Now we'll take a look at the information that has populated the payment summaries for each of the employees. The headings across the top here are fairly self-explanatory. There are only 2 areas of the payment summaries that you can edit. To see this, click on the Actions button on the right-hand side of the Employee Payment Summary line, and then select Edit. You'll then see that the fields for the payment period, start and end dates, and the RFBA columns become available for editing. Just a note though, before you edit RFBA amounts, we strongly recommend that you do an end-of-year reconciliation comparing the detailed activity report, which you can generate from the Reports tab, and the Payment Summaries report. To download the Payment Summaries report, click the Download button and select the Excel option. Further detail on how to do this reconciliation can be found in the End of Financial Year Guide. If you do need to edit RFBA, enter the grossed up amount, the whole amount with no cents, into the RFBA field and click on Save. If you have an employee with negative gross earnings, the employee will be highlighted in red on the Payment Summaries screen. If you hover over their name, you'll see the following error message display. If you go to the Actions button, you'll see that there is no option to publish. And if we were publishing in bulk, this employee would not be included in the available payment summaries. Since it's not possible to report negative earnings, you'll need to correct the earnings before publishing the payment summary. To fix this, you'll need to process an adjustment pay to ensure that year-to-date earnings are not negative. If you need to correct any RESC-related amounts, for instance, as mentioned earlier, where salary sacrifice super has not been correctly set up, you can do this via the Actions drop-down at the top of the screen. I won't go into this now, but detailed instructions, again, are available in the End of Financial Year Guide. Okay, so once you've reviewed all the information in the payment summaries and completed your reconciliation, you can now go ahead and publish the payment summaries. The deadline for issuing payment summaries to employees is the 14th of July. You may wish to preview the payment summaries before publishing. You can use this PDF option here to download the payment summaries. You can also use this option if you manually hand out or post these documents to your employees. Payment summaries can be published in bulk or on an individual basis. To publish each employee's payment summary individually, go to the Actions button on the employee's payment summary line and click the Publish option. To publish in bulk, go to the Actions button at the top of the screen and select the Publish option. The pop-up screen shows how many payment summaries you're about to publish, and if you need to unpublish all the payment summaries in bulk, you can also do that from here. There's also an option you can use if these payment summaries need to all be marked as amended, but we'll have a look at that later. Now that the payment summaries have all been published, you can see their status has changed. If you hover over the status, you'll see the details of when the payment summary was published. Publishing payment summaries works in the same way as publishing payslips. It makes these documents available for your employees to view or download from the employee self-service portal or the WorkZone app if they have access. Once the payment summaries have been published, you can now send email notifications. To do this, click on the Send Notification option at the top of the screen. The pop-up will show you how many notifications are about to be sent. Then you just need to click on Send Notifications. The email will contain a link for employees to download the payment summary. Once notifications have been sent, you'll see a message appearing for each employee under the published status that will show you when notifications were sent. As you may have noticed, a warning will appear for any employees whose notification can't be sent because they don't have an email address on file. To fix this, we'll first need to make sure that the employee has their email address added to the file, and then you can simply click on the Actions button on this employee's line and then click Send Notification. I'll show you that now. And now all our employees have their notifications. Now that we've published our payment summaries and sent notifications to the employees, the only thing left to do is to lodge the information with the ATO. The deadline for lodging payment summaries is the 14th of August. There are two lodgement options available. There's electronic lodgement, which you can access via the Lodge button. And there's also the option to download the EMP-dupe file. I'll just mention at this point, if you are a WPN holder, you'll need to either download the EMP-dupe file and upload via your ATO business portal, or report to the ATO using paper forms. We won't be covering the EMP-dupe process today, but the end of financial year guide will include instructions on this process. Before we go ahead and start the electronic lodgement process, we'll first need to make sure the payroll file is in fact enabled for electronic lodgement. Enabling electronic lodgement is the same process as for registering for STP, and I'll be showing you how to do that later in the webinar. To check whether you have electronic lodgement enabled, you can go to the ATO settings page. So we'll do that now. On the Electronic Lodgement and STP tab, you'll see whether or not your file has been enabled. My business here is enabled for electronic lodgement, so we can go ahead and start the lodgement process. Now, back on the payment summaries page. When lodging your data to the ATO, you'll need to do this on a per employing entity basis. If I just try to click on Lodge now, while my payment summaries are filtered for all employing entities, I will get this error. So you just need to adjust the filter to one employing entity at a time. I'll change my filter now to the default employing entity. And then I can now click on Lodge. You'll see this pop-up screen with all the information about what you're about to do. You'll see how many payment summaries are included in the lodgement and if any of them are ETPs. You'll also then need to read the declaration and tick the authorization. And all that's left to do is to click the Lodge Now option. You can see that this is now processing. Because electronic lodgement is enabled, all of this information is being submitted directly to the ATO straight from the software. This also means there's no need for a separate payment summary report either. This information is all included in the one lodgement. So what does a payment summary look like? I can click on the Actions button here for this employee and then select Download. And this is what the payment summary looks like. You can see here the separate reporting for allowances and RESC. If you've already lodged payment summaries, but now need to make adjustments, you need to take the following steps. First, unpublish the payment summary. Then make the adjustments. Click Edit. I'm going to add RFBA. And then tick the amended checkbox to mark the payment summary as amended. And I just need to save that. Once I've marked it as amended, I can then publish and lodge it again with the ATO. Alternatively, if all payment summaries need to be marked as amended, this can be done in bulk when you publish them all. So we go up to the Actions button up here. And if I, first of all, unpublish those existing payment summaries, and then I can go in and add RFBA. I'm not going to check the checkbox here, just to demonstrate. I'll go back up to the Actions button and publish the payment summaries, and then here I'll tick the checkbox to mark them as amended, and then click Publish. When you go to lodge the amendment again, you can choose the Amended Only option, and that will send through the data just for the employee that was amended. So if we click the Lodge button here, and then in this drop-down, you'll see this option here. So we'll just leave that one for the moment. If you need to amend a payment summary but haven't already lodged, because the ATO has not been provided with the payment summary and annual report, after first unpublishing and then making the necessary adjustments, all you need to do is publish the affected employees' payment summaries again. It's also best to send out a notification again so that your employees are aware that another version of their payment summary is available. Okay, so now we've covered off all the end-of-year processes for businesses that are required to provide eligible employees with a payment summary. Before we move on, I'll just reiterate those key ATO deadlines. The final date to provide your employees with their payment summaries is 14 July, and the deadline for lodging payment summaries to the ATO is the 14th of August. Now it's time to take a quick look at setting up STP. As I mentioned earlier, as of the 1st of July, businesses with closely held payees and micro-employers without a concession must start reporting through STP. Just to note, we'll have a dedicated recording and support article to step you through the process of reporting closely held employees via STP, and we'll send through links to these to everyone who's registered for today's session. Please note also that WPN holders will continue to be exempt from STP reporting until the 1st of July 2022. However, if you are a WPN holder and you want to start reporting via STP earlier than the 1st of July next year, you will need to use a registered tax or BAS agent to do it on your behalf. This is because the ATO does not currently support electronic lodgements for WPN holders. You may already be reporting other employees via STP, But for those who are new to STP, I'll take you through the registration process now. We're going to have a look at this on a new business that I've got here. On the payroll dashboard, we have the Enable Single Touch Payroll button, which will launch the STP registration wizard. Although you might have enabled electronic lodgement from the ATO settings Electronic Lodgement and STP tab, the only option to launch the STP registration wizard is from the dashboard. So, we'll start the STP registration wizard now. The first page here has a short introduction on what STP is all about. When you've read that, you can click on the Proceed option, and this will take you to the first step of the wizard, which is to confirm your business details. All of this info will automatically populate from the ATO settings tab. The options down the bottom here include Cancel, Save for Later, which will save the details you've checked or entered so far, and means you can relaunch the wizard later without losing any of the entered data, and Next, which will take you to the next step. And now I just need to add in a phone number. So the second part of the wizard is the lodgement authority. This is where you'll need to nominate who'll be lodging STP on behalf of the business. There are three options here: the employer, a registered tax or BAS agent, or an intermediary from multiple employing entities. If you have a tax or BAS agent reporting on your behalf, you'll need to enter the agent's details. If you have multiple employing entities set up in the business, you'll need to select the intermediary option and enter the details of the entity you wish to nominate to be the intermediary. The tooltip here has a detailed explanation of the differences between all of these options. We're going to register as the employer today and click Next. The last step in the wizard is enabling ATO integration. You'll need to first make sure that you've registered your software provider and software ID with the ATO. You can register your payroll provider information in a couple of ways. You can do this via the online ATO portal, or you can simply phone the tax office on the number here. Please note that unless this step is correctly completed, STP lodgements will fail, so it's essential that you register the software ID as per these instructions. Once you've done that, select the method you used to register with. Today I'm going to choose option 2, which is the phone option, and acknowledge the declaration and authorization, and then click on Complete. And that has enabled your business for Single Touch Payroll. You can see here that we have a few links with lots more information about STP reporting. Okay, so we're going to go back to the dashboard. Here you can see that the Enable STP option is no longer displaying. So let's take a look at the ATO settings now that we've enabled STP. On the ATO settings tab, you can see that the option is showing for who will be reporting to the ATO on behalf of the business. Here we have the employer selected. Then over on the Electronic Lodgement and STP tab, you can see that Electronic Lodgement is now enabled. You'll also have this setting appearing, which is your BMS ID. This will uniquely identify your business when submitting reports to the ATO, and it's automatically created for the business. For any extra assistance with navigating the STP registration wizard, you can take a look at our dedicated support article. And for more information about reporting via STP, you can check out our YouTube channel for webinars on how to process pay events and update events. This now concludes our presentation, but we'll stay online for another 5 to 10 minutes to answer any further questions you might have. just pop those in the Q&A. And a reminder, we'll be emailing info packs after today's webinar with our end of financial year guide and links to a recording of the webinar. Thanks so much for attending, and we hope it was of assistance.